Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Benjamin Britten's The Turn of the Screw, which was shown at the Staatsoper im Theater. The conductor was Christopher Molds. The production was done by Claus Guth. The set design and costumes were handled by Christian Schmidt. The lights were handled by Sebastian Alphonse, and the dramaturgy was handled by Ivona Gabawa and Roman Rega. Now, this was yet another Benjamin Britten opera which has had international fame because of the huge amount of international singers really well known in this opera, aside from the likes of Billy Budd or Peter Grimes or Death in Venice or A Midsummer Night's Dream. And this also marks the fourth Benjamin Britten opera I have seen in my lifetime. And what I also found interesting about this opera was that this is also based on the novel of the same name written by Henry James. Now, I have never read this horror novel before because I've mainly been exposed to the likes of Edgar Allan Poe where British horror is concerned. So, for those of you who've read the novel, I could already tell that this novel is also going to be worth the read, so let me know in the comments what you really think about the novel and if I should definitely give it a read because I'm probably going to read it anyway. Also, this is also going to sound rather random, but one of my favorite singers who also starred in the role of the Governess, Maria Bengtsson, stated on Facebook that there were 4 people who couldn't really make it tonight, probably because of personal reasons. And I basically chimed in the comments and said that I wanted that free ticket. So I said, yes, I wanted that free ticket. And she said, yes, you're going to get it. And I managed to really enjoy myself through this evening. And I actually knew that she was going to do really well, but I'll actually get to her later in this review. For now, I'd like to talk about the production. And with Claus Guth, like I said before in my other reviews talking about this gentleman, he has a very minimalistic approach and also focuses a lot on the character psychology and even the darker aspects of the human mind and the human soul. I really felt that this opera managed to really put his mind into great use as he was able to really get a lot of the gothic tones and even a lot of the horror elements and the thriller elements, which really make this opera really, really chilling in its own special way. It didn't need to rely on jump scares. It just needed to rely on atmosphere and an overall sense of danger and an overall sense of mystery. As you see the main heroine of this opera, the Governess, wandering from hallway to hallway, trying to figure out what are the mysteries behind this house, behind this mansion that Mrs. Gross, Flora, and Miles, and a myriad of other ghosts seem to inhabit. So this is definitely a very chilling production, which really puts great use to what Claus Guth wants to really put out. It's especially helped, especially in terms of the color. Yes, a lot of the walls, or even all the walls, have this crimson red color as if to suggest blood or something terrible has happened in this house. And even though for some people it might seem blatant or probably too much symbolism, I thought it managed to really portray its symbolism well, as in the color palettes will always suggest that there is definitely something going wrong in this house, as in dreadfully wrong, and especially helped with the addition of the creepy atmosphere, and especially when it comes to the pictures of Flora and Miles in the first few moments of the opera, where we see 2 pictures of them and their eyes are closed. But in the end of the opera, we see that Flora's picture is taken down, and then we see a picture of Miles with his eyes wide open. And it also is quite interesting to know that traditional productions have Miles played by a child treble, Whereas in this production tonight, we see that Miles is portrayed by a young adult countertenor. I think it's also to suggest that Flora and Miles are somewhat twins, even though some traditional productions would suggest that Flora is the eldest girl and Miles is the younger boy. In this production, I have the feeling that they act a lot more like twins, being in their teens and all that. What with both Flora and Miles being about 13, 14, 15, 16, basically teenagers in general, but still trudging between childhood and adolescence. And even the rotations from scene to scene were definitely quite chilling and rather interesting, especially when it comes to the scene with Flora and Miles with a rabbit. Now, they do a lot of messed up things with a rabbit, even though sometimes there are definitely moments in which they seem to befriend the rabbit. And also we get to see some dancers with Flora's and Miles's like huge masks performing certain deeds. And when it comes to other traditional productions in which we see Peter Quint and Miss Jessel, in this production we don't really see them in person. We only hear their voices, thus adding a creepy element, as if to say that Peter Quint and Miss Jessel are the ghosts that inhabit the house. So I really have to say that Claus Guth really does a very fine job with this production. And this is definitely his territory when it comes to working with operas which have a horror element or which have a thriller element. I really feel that these operas are definitely in his element, so he really does very fine with this production, and it really left me on the edge of my seat every single time. And then we get to the singing, starting off with Maria Bengtsson. Now, I heard her last year as Fiordaligi, and this time she is singing the Governess. Now, the Governess is a role which requires a lyric soprano who also needs to have a little spinto in her voice. Think of the likes of any soprano who has sung the likes of the Countess Almaviva from Marriage of Figaro, Agathe from Der Freischütz, Rachel from La Juive, Christine Stoch from Intermezzo, and many, many other roles for a full lyric soprano. And even Suor Angelica Blanche de la Force from Le Dialogue de Carmelite, and who was that again? Yes, Lisa from the Queen of Spades, and Melisande from Peleas et Melisande. In this production, she is on stage throughout the entire opera without any respite. So you really need a soprano who can combine the lyricism of a Countess Almaviva with the more dramatic singing of that of an Elisabetta from Don Carlo. And I thought that Maria Bengtsson managed to really do a very, very wonderful and scintillating job with this character. You really get to see the governess's inner turmoils, her inner demons coming out in this opera. You really get to see everything that bothers her. You really get to see everything. And she lets it out really well, helped with a very fine voice, which she's been very well known for. And throughout the years, I've been seeing this very fine singer starting out in some of the light lyrical roles, and then going into the more full lyrical roles, and then going into more challenging roles. Heck, she even sang the Marschallin in yet another opera theater, and this time she is singing the Governess. I thought she managed to sing her role very fabulously, and she was able to really navigate all of those difficult passages very well, showing a very fine technique and showing lots of determination, lots of willpower, and lots of excitement. And as I said before, she was also the one who offered me the free ticket. So I'm eternally grateful for that. So to you, Mademoiselle Maria Bengtsson, you did a fabulous job with this role. Keep on rocking, and you were definitely a joy to watch on stage. And then we get to the roles of Flora and Miles, who are the children. With Flora, we'll start off with Sonia Grane in this role. Now, Flora, unlike the governess, needs a lighter lyric soprano to really sing this role. Any light lyric soprano who has sung the likes of Cherubino from Marriage of Figaro or even Susanna, Despina from Così fan tutte, Zerlina from Don Giovanni, Agnol from Peleas et Melisande, Ähnchen from Der Freischütz, the Sandman from Hänsel and Gretel, and the Princess Eudoxie from La Juive, Sister Constance from Le Dialogue de Carmelite, and Suor Genoviefa from Suor Angelica. A lot of these really wonderful light lyric and soubrette sopranos flock to sing her as comparison with the likes of a lot of full lyric sopranos who sing the governess. So with Sonia Grane as Flora, I thought she managed to do a very fine job with this role. In fact, I've heard her a lot in other productions as Barbarina and Blonde, and even Echo from Ariadne of Naxos. And here she is singing the role of Flora, and I thought she did very fabulously, really playing off the bratty element of this kid character and making her very petulant, making her very fun-loving at times, yet kind of making her kind of nuts. But it's an enjoyable type of nuts to see from beginning to end. So she really did a very fine job. And then we have the role of Miles, sung by Thomas Lichtenecker. Now, traditionally, Miles is sung by a child treble. In fact, a lot of child trebles have made their mark on this role. And to have this role sung by a young adult countertenor was rather interesting, and it made me wonder how well could this guy pull it off. Well, I thought he managed to really pull off Miles very well. I think what Claus Guth envisioned in this production is that he wants to show Miles as someone who is slowly venturing into more mature teenagerhood or something like that. He just wants to see Miles as more of an adolescent than a kid because, well, I think the whole juxtaposition of how Miles sees the world as a kid and how he grows up into being more of a teen and then later on into a young adult kind of is rather fascinating psychologically and to some extent very physically. So to really have someone like Thomas Lichtenecker really do a fine job as Miles, even though he is a countertenor, really does show the dedication he gives to this role and how he's able to make Miles a very interesting enigma. And then we get to the role of Mrs. Gross, sung by the veteran Irish lyric coloratura mezzo-soprano Anne Murray. Now the thing about Mrs. Gross is that she has attracted a lot of spinto and dramatic sopranos and even high dramatic mezzos. Personally, I always love it when either a spinto or a lyric dramatic soprano sings this role. Any soprano who has sung the likes of Abigail from Nabucco, Odabella from Attila, Lina from Stifelio, Lida from La Battaglia di Legnano, Chrysothemis from Electra, the Marschallin from Rosenkavalier, Arabella from Arabella, Freya from Das Rheingold, Zenta from Der Fliegende Holländer, Valentina from Les Huguenots, Madame Lidouane from Le Dialogue de Carmelite, and Giulietta from Tales of Hoffmann. I always prefer it when a spinto soprano or a dramatic soprano sings this role, but I thought that Anne Murray really did a fine job. Initially, when I heard that Anne Murray was going to sing this role, I didn't know what to expect because this woman has been singing the lyric coloratura mezzo role for several years. And nowadays she sings the likes of Marcellina from Marriage of Figaro and many other character roles. So I was quite apprehensive at first, but when I heard her sing, I could still recognize the freshness that she still has in her voice. I could still recognize just how youthful her voice really seems to be. And she has a very fine technique. And this is also coming from someone who used to sing the likes of Ariodante from Handel, and even the likes of Serse as well, and even a lot of the pants roles. So I was quite surprised to see this veteran singer really give all the goods in this role, and she did an excellent job. And then we have the offstage voice of Anna Samuel, who sang the role of Miss Jessel. Now, with Miss Jessel, she does have a similar fach to that of Mrs. Gross, albeit Miss Jessel is more of a high spinto soprano, or even that of a fuller lyric soprano compared to the likes of the Governess. Any soprano who has sung the likes of Amelia from Un ballo in maschera, or Amelia from Simon Boccanegra, or Leonora from Oberto, Manon Lescaut by Puccini, Ariadne from Ariadne auf Naxos, and to some extent Marianne Leitmetzerin from Der Rosenkavalier. I always prefer that high spinto soprano to even sing this role. And I thought that Anna Samuel managed to continue giving such a wonderful job, as I've also heard her as Violetta and Donna Anna last year. She continues to give such fine, silvery, golden tones that she managed to really pour out from her voice. She did wonderfully, and she was able to really put in a lot of soul and heart in this very thankless character. And then we have the roles of the gentleman from the prologue and Peter Quint, sung by Richard Croft. Now, when it comes to these two roles, they have attracted a lot of lyric tenors, light lyric tenors to be exact. Especially when it comes to tenors who have been specializing in not only the British opera repertoire, but also the likes of Handel, Gluck, and Mozart, and even a lot of the 18th century works and early bel canto, and even some of the smaller tenor roles like Arturo Bucklaw and Normanno from Lucia di Lammermoor, and even the likes of Hervey from Anna Bolena, and Flavio from Norma, and Bruno Robertson from I Puritani. A lot of these late lyric tenors have flocked to sing the prologue and Peter Quint. At times, these roles could actually be sung by two separate lyric tenors, like one tenor would sing the role of the prologue, and the other would sing the role of Peter Quint. I thought that with Richard Croft, I really love him in these two roles. When he started off as the gentleman from the prologue, you really do get to see that type of message that he plans to convey, saying that this tale might shock you, this tale might put you in a position where you are not going to feel that comfortable, but I swear it's going to be something that will be worth your time. And then when he sang the role of Peter Quint, man, was he very commanding in this role, making a great use of his lyric tenor voice to really, really put this role with such fine flair and character. So overall, I really have to say that the singing was excellent. Special kudos goes to Maria Bengtsson for really, really putting in a lot of heart and soul for such a very thankless character. In fact, this was also a role that has also been sung by the likes of a lot of British sopranos, especially Heather Harper. Now, she's also a very well-known governess, and to really see someone like Maria Bengtsson sing this role was an absolute treat. And the conducting done by Maestro Christopher Molds was really well done. He was able to play really well and pay a great amount of attention to all the fine details, and he did a very fine job. So overall, I really have to say that when it comes to a lot of the Claus Guth productions, I really have to say that this is a Claus Guth production at its best, really making a great use of its color and its atmosphere, and its overall thrills and chills was really excellent. And the singing was equally as excellent, and so was the conducting. If you haven't seen this opera yet, I really suggest you go check it out. This will put a good chill in your bones, and especially when it comes to very fine singing. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in on Valentine's Day, where I review Wagner's Lohengrin at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. I would have loved to review Peter Grimes tomorrow, but the thing is, I have a couple of shoots to attend to and a casting, so life as an actor is never easy, but I have to do it anyway. But until then, I wish you all a good night.